Awesome. Getting some thumbs up from everybody. Great news. Alrighty. Well, without further ado, hello and welcome everybody to today's What the Next Gen Wants Most at Work presentation of the Hatch Hotlist Insights report. My name's Bella Codzi. I look after employer success at Hatch, and it is my great pleasure to be joined in the esteemed company of our panelists today, who I will not hesitate to introduce us immediately. Let me get up exactly what we should be chatting through. The first person I'm thrilled to introduce you all to today is the wonderful Charlotte Anderson, the Head of People Experience at Canva. Charlotte leads global people experience at Canva, supporting a community of over 180 million monthly users and 4,500 employees worldwide. Charlotte, is that still the right stat? I'm sure it's grown overnight.
Yeah, probably has, but yes, that's correct.
She designs programs that foster growth, well-being, and sustainable high performance in one of the world's fastest growing companies while championing inclusivity and culture. Charlotte, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Dom Price, very pleased to introduce yourself today in Newfound Freedom. You're a Sydney-based work futurist and former Atlassian team doctor, well known for designing adaptable ways of working that help teams to thrive. With a career spanning tech, finance, and gaming, and travels to over 50 countries. Has that number gone up overnight?
Yes, 53.
53, there you go. Dom brings a global yet human-centered perspective on the future of work. You're a sought-after keynote speaker and commentator, and recognized for inspiring people to reimagine how they work and live, which I imagine is becoming even more important in this day and age. Thank you, Dom, for joining us.
Thanks.
And finally, Claudia. Claudia is Rippling's founding enterprise SDR in APAC and a leading voice for the next wave of tech sales talent. Today, Claudia represents the voice of Gen Z on our platform, on our webinar, sorry. And after a viral street interview, which I hope everybody's seen, launched Claudia into the spotlight, she's become known for her research-led approach to prospecting and her mission to make sales more human, strategic, and accessible to those breaking into the industry. In just a moment, I will introduce our co-founder of Hatch, Adam, to also talk us through the insights and facilitate today's panel. But just so that you've got a bit of a sense of what's to come today, we're going to look through the various report insights, the top 5, in fact, and have a dig into what the data of our Hotlist survey is showing this year before opening to the panel on discussion of each of those points. Towards the end of this webinar, we'll be able to reveal the top 20 winners of the hot list, which is always a hugely exciting moment in Hatch history for the year. And then, of course, we'll be opening up to Q&A. So if you're able to find your way into the Q&A section of the webinar, do pop some questions in there. And we've got plenty that have been pre-submitted as well. So we'll make sure we leave lots of time for lively conversation towards the end of the session. Without further ado, here is an intro to our founder, Adam Jacobs, who co-founded Hatch with a mission for all people to find meaning in work. Adam also casually co-founded The Iconic, Australia's largest online fashion retailer, and he has a background in strategy consulting at BCG and PwC. Adam is passionate about how technology reshapes societies and how great teams fuel great companies, and that is the name of the game of what we'll be chatting through today. So I'd love to introduce Adam.
Thanks, Bella, and really good to be here with everyone and the panelists. Love Bella's intro. Bella's actually a wedding celebrant outside of work, so if anyone's getting married soon on the call, you can just drop her a line on LinkedIn. She's in high demand. So what we're going to do today is share some of the top insights coming out of the annual Hatch Hotlist report and survey. And we've pulled out the top about 5. I'm going to start by describing the insight and what we heard in the findings, and then we're going to discuss it as a panel and what's it mean. And we'll work through the top about 5 insights. For a bit of context on the hot list, so if you haven't heard of Hatch, Hatch is a jobs platform for young Australians, people who are mostly Gen Z and millennial. And Hatch matches young people to jobs based on their underlying skills, values, and interests fit in a more AI-first approach. We've seen hundreds of thousands of young Australians look for and find jobs on Hatch across hundreds of employers. And so each year we like to survey them and we like to understand what's top of mind for young people today, what's driving their career choices so that we can help them find the right match. The hot list tends to survey about 2,000 people. We broadly ask about two things. Firstly, who do you want to work for? Like, which are the top employer brands that young people today are most interested in? And secondly, why? What's driving your choices? What are the top factors that's helping you decide which job to go for? So at the end of today's webinar, we'll reveal the top 20, like who are the employer brands that are at the top of the list. But we're going to get started with some of the insights. So let me just come over to the screen here. So let's jump into the first insight. So the first one is around the overall theme that's driving young people's choices today. We ask a question, what do you value most in a job in 2025? And when we look at the data on the screen here, we can see that growth and learning opportunities clearly is the #1 factor that's driving career choices, followed closely by salary. Salary was actually #1 last year, so it's fallen a little bit to #2. And then from there, there's a few that are quite close together, balance, impact, workplace, and creativity and innovation. When we dig a little deeper behind the data and we look at what people said in terms of qualitative feedback, and when we also look at what their responses were to other questions, and we try and make sense of like the whole thing, what we've heard that's really going on here is that young Australians today are valuing security above all else. They're experiencing the world of work in 2025 to be very fast changing. They're experiencing that through AI changing the definition of a job and a career path, through a ongoing cost of living crisis putting financial pressure on, and through some macroeconomic forces at play that's sort of making the world feel a little bit unstable and a little bit fast changing right now. And so in the midst of all of that happening around them in their environment, young people are looking for opportunities that present a sense of security in their career. And security is being pursued through career paths that provide growth and learning opportunities so that they can grow their career capital. And then also through financial stability in terms of salary and a few other things that we'll talk about on the call today, such as the right work from home policy and the right opportunities to have balance and experiences outside of work. So I want to start off with this insight to have a chat about with the panel, the insight being that above all else, the next generation currently are looking for a sense of security at work, and that's mostly showing up through valuing growth and learning opportunities. I'm going to start with Charlotte to explore a little bit how this is being experienced at Canva. So Charlotte, my question for you to kick us off is, what does career growth mean at Canva? And has AI changed how you communicate career paths to candidates who are considering Canva as their next employer?
Yeah, we're thinking about this a lot at the moment. This is top of mind for us as well. So it's a great question and one to kick off with. So I think the way we approach growth at Canva is that it's something that is like you're in the driver's seat of your growth. So it's something that you create every day. And we talk a lot about doing the best work of your life and also being surrounded by people who are going to elevate you and keep you going. As well as, and I think this is becoming more and more common, right? And I'm a great example of it, is that it's not about kind of climbing a ladder and necessarily collecting those titles. It's about that kind of jungle gym of a career and looking at the impact that you're having, the skills that you can sharpen, the opportunities that you can unlock for you and your team. And rather than kind of looking at that traditional, that traditional kind of up, more thinking about how you could stretch yourself from side to side. So it's something that we talk about so much at Canva. It's a core part of our EVP and offering. But I think to answer your question around how AI has then shaped how we communicate that both to candidates, but also as well, like openly to our team, because we're also experiencing this change at the same time. AI has really, really accelerated that philosophy. We've obviously seen new roles emerge overnight. We've had to get really, really clear with both our team and with candidates. Like if you're curious and if you're willing to kind of build your own playbook and experiment really boldly, your growth at Canva, and to be honest, like this, I think this is true of anywhere, but your growth at Canva will move faster than you can kind of imagine. And I think our messaging with candidates is very much around like, come in curious, bring that creativity, bring that bold thinking, and then AI will be that multiplier for your impact rather than a replacement. So yeah, that's how we're talking and thinking about growth and AI at the moment.
And Charlotte, are you hearing any sort of, I don't know, like concerns or worries from candidates this year that might be new compared to previous years of how AI is going to impact their like career path or might impact their opportunities?
Yes, of course. And I think most people, I would say, are hearing that. And so much of it as well is it's around positioning and tooling and giving people the opportunity to learn. So a great example in, I want to say June, but what is time? Some point in the middle of the year, we did Canva's AI Discovery Week, which was literally a tools down for the entire company for a week to go and invest in building their knowledge in AI and understanding how it can work. And a big part of that, it's not just around kind of learning how to prompt really well in ChatGPT or starting to think about MCPs or stuff. That's definitely a side of it, but it's also as well thinking about the mindset side of things and having that open mindset, being curious, really opening up to possibilities. So we're also doing a lot of work more on mindset and behaviors as well as AI to kind of counterbalance them. But we're seeing across the board candidates and Canvanauts employees asking about kind of future of roles because of AI.
Awesome. Claudia, I want to come to you next as our Gen Z representative in the conversation today. What I talked through in terms of the mindset of young Australians feeling the fast-changing world of work and seeking out security, does that resonate with you? Is it something that you're feeling yourself, or how do you connect with that insight?
Yeah, it's interesting because it is something that is spoken about quite commonly, I'd say, among my peers over at Rippling and in my wider network as well. And I think the common sentiment is that among Gen Zs, security is less about whether you'll have that job that you're in currently next quarter and more about whether you can keep that momentum going in the job that you're in currently. So it's kind of like, what skills matter for me next? Like as an SDR, am I continually leveling up to become an AE? Like, will my company help me build them? And I think that's the real safety net here because, being stagnant is obviously going to threaten the security of keeping your job because, obviously with AI, as we've been talking about, like staying stagnant in your skills, AI is going to quickly learn how to do various things and potentially replace it. I also think that I think a lot about security like a portfolio. So I know that my personal brand is something that I invest in quite significantly. Obviously, I've had that bit of a leg up with the TikTok video that did go viral, as mentioned earlier. But, I invest a lot in my network, my skills stack, my personal brand. And that way, if one door does shut, I know that there are lots that can be opened elsewhere through, my LinkedIn network, whatever it might be.
Yeah, awesome. So it sounds like sort of really investing into skill development is the focal point. Skill development and personal brand are like the focal points for you.
Definitely, yeah.
Charlotte, I did not want to offend you by suggesting you're not Gen Z. I no assumptions made here. You could be Gen Alpha for all I know, honestly. Dom, let's come to you next. You've obviously worked with a lot of different employers on their strategies for attracting and developing people. How does this insight sit with you, and what do you think employers should be thinking about in terms of the right kind of strategies that might meet the moment?
Yeah, if Claudia's the Gen Z, I can be the grumpy old man, right? And I don't mean this to be purposely grumpy, but I just want to call out a stark difference, right? I love this stat, right? That the people, what they're craving is growth. Claudia, you mentioned that it's not just sort of security in the current job; it's how employable am I in the medium to long term, right? So I can sustain a lifestyle and stuff like. I think that's been the same for every generation. I think the reality is that the world Gen Z are entering is completely different than the one I entered, right? When I entered my sort of graduate career. I think what's fascinating though, Adam, and we've talked about this a little bit before, if you flip this and you ask the employer, what like the number one topic right now in AI is productivity. It's not growth. It's not how can I make you a better person. It's how can I squeeze a little bit more out of you. And so I think we almost need to draw the Venn diagram and go, where's the intersection of what the employee wants, right? I want to grow, I want sustainability, I want momentum in market, I want to have universally applicable skills, I want to be traversable, I want all these things. And then from the employer's perspective of going, how do I make my business more efficient in a really competitive market right now? And I think if we can find an intersection there, we can find something, I think Claudia and both you and Charlotte mentioned, like an employee value prop that works for both parties. Whereas now they seem, if I'm honest, they seem a little bit at odds with each other, and we've not yet nailed where that intersection is. And I think that's why we're grasping at stuff, right? We're grasping at growth because it's not there right now. It's a desire because there's a bit of a void.
So there's like a bit of a mismatch you're suggesting there between like what candidates or employees are looking for and like what's on the mind of employers and what they're trying to pursue.
Yeah, and just to call out, I think that mismatch is lower in smaller organizations that are more nimble and adaptable, and organizations that are new. Like if you're building something from scratch in the last 3 or 4 years, you've built it with AI on your mind, right? If you're running a 150-year telco or bank, you're like, I've got 150 years of heritage and history to unravel before I can layer this on. So I think it's just, depending where you are in the stack of sort of giant legacy enterprise to, cool new startup, we're not all starting at the same start point here. And I think that's worth noting, that actually you could get great job security in a static environment, but not grow, right? And you're like, actually, I don't want that. I want to grow and I want to be relevant in 5 years. That's probably a different environment than the static one where you're going to be comfortable, but not growing.
Charlotte, you're an employer. Does that resonate with you? Do you experience that mismatch?
I think so. And as I said, it's something that we've been kind of actively talking about at the moment, but there's also as well that expectation is made quite clear. It's a conversation that's had quite openly in that, as part of developing your skills using AI, the expectation is that you are more productive. The expectation is that you are able to move at pace. The expectation, and I think there needs to be, I completely agree with Dom, and we're all starting, to Dom's point, in different places, but the more transparent that you can be with your team around those conversations and say, look, if we're going to be enabling you and upskilling you in order to meet the needs of not just today, but your career in 5, 10, whatever years, I mean, goodness knows where we'll be then, but there is if you can also be transparent on like, and this is what it's going to enable you to do, that it's a really clear why, and it's a really clear kind of trade-off on what is happening. It's like you build your skills, but at the same time, we hope that there's productivity there. And I think, and this is where we have been on our journey, is particularly around AI skill development at Canva. It has been, we really realized that we had to do foundational work. And that was probably 2 years ago, coming into last year. And then there was this shift, and it was like, okay, that's great. We've now given you all the tools and the foundation, which is what enabled us to do AI Discovery Week, because we were kind of able to light a proverbial fire underneath those foundational skills that people had, for them to take it into a place where they can be more productive. And we're absolutely seeing that pay off in spades. So, but that was a very open conversation. I think that was something that we didn't discuss with the team.
Just Adam, just before we wrap this topic, I also think it's just worth calling out in 2025 that your employer is not your only source of growth, right? The world has changed, right? The access, right? The ubiquitous access to knowledge and wisdom and courses, and people are like, I don't need my employer to tap me on the shoulder and go, Dom, you need to sit down and learn a bit of AI, right? That is something that's available in the world. And so I think to both Claudia and Charlotte's point, that's where the self-starter is going to get ahead. Because the self-starter is going to do this anyway and equip themselves with this broad set of skills that make them more employable. But they're not waiting for the L&D team to go, hey, here's a packaged up course, go and sit in the classroom. They're on the Learner app, and they're accessing their own learning in their own time because they want to grow themselves. And that mindset, I think, will be a great differentiator for anyone in the future of work.
Yeah, it's a great point, and a good segue to one of the insights we're going to talk about today around side hustles being on the rise. But let's move to the second one, which is around hybrid work models and work preferences in general. So one of the things we like to explore on the hot list is what's going on in terms of young people's preferences to spending time in office or working remote. What we heard this year was that hybrid's the clear winner. The majority of people, about 70% of people, prefer hybrid. When you look into what they mean by hybrid, mostly people want 2 or 3 days in the office. When you start asking people to come in 4 and certainly 5, you lose some of your talent market. And then the other sort of feature of hybrid work that we saw is that young people are clear for some structure and boundaries around the policy. So not that it's just sort of free for all, come in when you want, but there's, for example, minimum office days. That was the most preferred option, or there's fixed office days, so everyone's coming at the same time. There's certainly that desire for a sense of structure, so they know the boundaries that they're working within. The other point that came out really strongly from the survey this year that was quite interesting was how much a preference for fully remote work is falling. Half as many people this year compared to last year are looking for jobs that offer fully remote work. And so what we heard through the surveys is really this desire to spend some of the week in person to develop genuine relationships with colleagues. And that is both, I think, for a sense of emotional connection, but also for career security, because often those relationships create the foundation that allow you to grow. So I'm going to start with Dom for this insight around fully remote work being on the decline and hybrid flexibility being the sort of new norm and the clear winner. Dom, you spent a lot of time at Atlassian, and Atlassian adopts a work from anywhere policy. Would love to see, how have you seen this evolve over time, both at Atlassian and also in the general employment market? What are you seeing in the amongst employers in terms of their approaches and attitudes towards remote work now?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, mate, because I actually think we're almost having the wrong conversation, and we have had since the pandemic. So there's 2 elements to this that I think are super, super important. One is flexibility. It's not where I physically work. It's flexibility, and I think flexibility on time, right? It could be you're caring for an elderly parent. It could be you're a parent yourself. You have pick up and drop off, right? You might have a health challenge, like whatever the things are that give you flexibility in work that mean that we're not constrained by this sort of 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And I think we've missed the flexibility conversation and instead had an argument about, are you a work from home? It's like we brandished people. It's like, oh, are you a work from home? You're like, boo, we don't like you. We're office people, right? We don't socialize with you. You're different to us. So I think that's one challenge. The other challenge that I've seen, certainly in market with a lot of established organizations, is this wonderful and beautiful utopian desire for a single answer. Where it's like, so what days is it? And actually your chart just showed there isn't an answer, right? So when you say it's Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and I won't tell you what acronym that gives you, but when you say it's Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, you're like, so what? Like, if that doesn't work for me, if I do drop off on Wednesday, I don't want to be on Wednesday, I want to be on Friday. So I think we inadvertently start to either try and solve for everyone all at once, one size fits all, or the mistake a lot of organizations made is build your own adventure. Charlotte, you do it your way. Claudia, you do it yours. Adam, you do it yours. Dom, you do it yours. And we're like ships in the night, right? We have no connection anymore because one's in on a Monday, one Tuesday, one Thursday, one Wednesday. No one's in on Friday, right? So I think what we're grasping for here is what's the real benefit, right? And you touched on it, like 82% in your stats, 82% of people want more connection, right? There's that out of sight, out of mind where people want to be immersed with their colleagues. But I think there's a reality we have to face up to right now. Most, right, I'm going to underline the word most, that most organizations I work with are distributed, right? So even if we all went into an office, one's in Melbourne, one's in Brisbane, one's in Sydney, so we're not in the same physical space. So the muscle I think we need to build in terms of like ways of working is how do we build connection and rapport and trust and psychological safety in a distributed fashion? And then what are the moments that matter where it's high fidelity, we have to gather, and Claudia, Charlotte, and me are going to get in a plane because it's so important for us to be in a room and solve it together. And I think we're missing that discussion. What are the high fidelity moments where we want to be together? And instead of saying in a normal working week, is it Tuesday? And you're like, there isn't an answer to that question. Stop asking the question. The real question is, what does flexibility look like in your employer value prop? And how do you do that consistently? And I think if we solve for connection and site safety, all generations are included in that. It's not just a Gen Z thing.
Yeah, we do have another slide in the full report, and we'll share around a link to download it afterwards for anyone who wants to have a look. We have another slide that breaks down these preferences across industries, and you do see like quite a variation across industries, to your point, Dom, about there not being a one-size-fits-all answer. Yeah. Claudia, I want to throw to you here. I mean, your early 20s, first, a couple of years of work, like what kind of conversations are you having with your friends about preferences towards how much time you spend in the office, and like, what matters to you, what's important to you around your time in the office?
Yeah, it's interesting because listening to what Dom said, I would agree. I think it's quite an interesting argument though about the not argument, but point about the high fidelity moments, as you said, Dom, in the sense that I don't think that there are specific moments personally that make sense to gather for in and what I mean when I say that is that, like, what I would miss if I was working fully remotely is like the osmosis, in the sense of overhearing things, like there's a guy, Alan, who I work with, who I'm sure that quite a few people on here are familiar with. And Alan is amazing. And, I'll just get a random nugget from him in the kitchen when we're both filling up our water. And it's kind of like, for me, those are the high fidelity moments per se that I like to go into the office for and that I don't want to miss out on. And I know at least at Rippling, the difference is clear in the sense that the days that I'm walking around the office, around my colleagues, I'm almost buzzing with ideas that I never would have at home. And I know that on the work from home days, my team, the SDR team, will literally open a Zoom call and we'll just sit in it together all day, sometimes on mute, sometimes off mute, but it's trying to like recreate that background chatter that we have within the office, because otherwise we do feel often quite isolated. And I think that it kind of tells you everything in the sense that we'll hack our connection back into the day if we have to, even if it's not fundamentally built in. So it's an interesting kind of set up to try and hack with this hybrid model that Rippling has. But I think that the connection is everything for me, and it's where I learn and I see myself grow the most. Yeah.
And do you feel like that preference has changed since COVID? I guess, were you sort of early at uni or maybe HSC around COVID about that? So if you think about from then to now, do you think attitudes within your peer group have changed towards how much time you want to spend in office?
Yeah, I think so. I completed my final exams at school during the COVID period and then went straight into work after that. And alongside uni. And I think that coming out of that period of exams, being fully remote, that's all I knew, honestly, like was the remote work, the remote study, whatever it might be. And so that was just the norm. But then having experienced bits and pieces in like the early stage startup that I worked in, of being in person and going to in-person events and meeting people like the Hatch team or the Canva team or whoever it might be, that's kind of when I got this insight into this new world, and I haven't looked back since.
Awesome. Charlotte, anything you want to add around like shifts you've seen internally at Canva and people's preferences?
No, look, we operate in such a similar way in that it is really flexibility, and that if you need to pick up your kids or you need to do this, you need to do that, like off you go. But we create incredible office experiences to bring people in for connection. Like it is even just our day-to-day in the office is something that you come in and you feel like like you're having a very Canva experience, and that's incredible. And I think that is what draws people in. But equally, and I think, to Claudia's point, it's actually those side conversations. It's the chats that you have. It's those moments of connection that aren't the big things. It's the little things. So we're seeing more people. I think we in the Sydney office, we get about, if I think it's 1,500 people on campus every day, which is pretty high when I think our Australian base is about 3,500. So, and we've got people all across Australia. So we have a pretty high number of people attending the office, but then also that kind of bends and flexes with what's happening. You see team leads also request that people are coming in on particular days for connection. It's a very kind of play it by ear, but I think it works. People want to be in the space, which is nice.
Brilliant. We'll move on to our third insight, 3 out of 5. And just a reminder for everyone on the call that we'll leave a bit of time for questions at the end. So as we're chatting, if questions are coming to mind for you, just pop them in the chat, and Bella's going to be able to source them out for us at the end. So the third one, we've talked a little bit about AI. In the hot list, we do a deep dive on how young people are feeling about and using AI each year. So we've got two interesting slides here to share. One is that generally the attitudes towards AI are positive in terms of how people are feeling about the impact AI will have on your career if you're earlier in your career. So the majority of people, about 2/3 of people, feel that AI is a opportunity to have more impact faster at work and embracing AI. You can see there's a bit of a variance here across job families, but the average is pretty consistent. It's about 2/3 positive, 35% neutral, and a very small percent, less than 1 in 10 feel threatened by AI. So that's quite clear that young Australians are feeling optimistic towards how they bring AI into their work. The second area that we explore is what about when it comes to job applications, and how's AI being used when people are applying to jobs? The majority of people are using AI in their job applications. I think no surprises there. And you can see down the bottom some common use cases, the number one being cover letters. And we talk to a lot of candidates at Hatch, and we often hear from candidates that writing cover letters and customizing resumes for them are the most painful part of the recruitment process. And so they're certainly using generative AI to try and ease some of that workflow, and then also research as well. And so the story here is that the majority of people, 90% of them, don't feel threatened by AI at work, and the majority of people are also starting to adopt AI in hiring processes. In job applications. Dom, I'm going to start with you here on this insight. So you've recently written about AI adoption being on a spectrum from just fixing broken systems to totally reinventing businesses. Would love to hear from you about where you think we're headed in terms of the impact of AI in how we are as employers and how we engage with candidates and team members.
Yeah, I think for the employee, I think your stats on the previous slide are quite profound. It's like you should feel quite excited and threatened. I want people to hold both opposing views in their head at the same time. It's like, this could be awesome or it could be awful because it's not been decided yet, right? It's not been written into the future. So I think it's up to us to decide. The specific thing that I talked about recently was I do a lot of work with CEOs, C-suite leaders of companies of all shapes and sizes. And it's no surprise, you look at the last sort of 10, 15 years at any transformation, agile transformation, digital transformation, now AI, is we take a new thing and we try and use it to fix old broken things, right? So if I look at the majority of certainly C-suite enterprise leaders that I've been working with for the last year or so, they would say, here's a broken thing in my organization, and I'm going to use AI to do it more efficiently. And that's the ask where I'm like, can we pause? Can we not do it? Right. And instead of doing something that we shouldn't do and do it faster, is there a chance to reinvent what we do and actually just do better things first? So, there's a lot of organizations saying, I'm really slow at how I do this. I want to do it faster. But you're like, is it the right thing to do? How do we take a time out? So that's like the -1 organizations. There's a whole lot of organizations this is like the 0 organizations that things like compliance, risk management, internal audit, where you're like, how can I use AI to do that slightly faster, maybe cheaper or more coverage? But it's never going to be the reason my organization exists, right? And that's actually quite a smart move, right? Things where you might invest a lot of human capital that's quite mundane work, get that done by an agent or by AI, and therefore free up that human capital for the creativity and the higher impact work. There's a small sliver of organizations. Charlotte, I'm sure you put Canva in this bucket. There's a few others I'm working with, like Lendy, right? Dave Hyman at Lendy, who've gone, hang on, how does AI fundamentally change my business model, how I build my customer experience, how my customers consume the product, even the markets that I'm in, right? So if you look at, there's an example I saw recently, an organization went back through their previous 2 years worth of business cases. They looked at the business cases where they'd said no and said, had AI existed, would the outcome of this business case have been different? And they found a new addressable market, right? A new opportunity from AI. Not many companies are doing that yet. They're doing the fixing. And so I think it's just like all things. It's like a maturity, right? Some are ready to adopt and they're on the bleeding edge. And others are like, oh, there's a new thing that we might think about possibly playing with in the next few years. And they're a little bit more hesitant. I think the challenge in Australia right now for employees and employers, this isn't going away, right? So the quicker we acknowledge that that curve is there and we decide where we want to be on that curve, the better for everyone. Because the curve's happening, our decision is, where do we want to be on it? Do we want to be a leader or do we want to be a laggard? And for the sake of Australia and our lifestyle and economy, I don't think we want to be a laggard. It might be a bit late to be a leader. So maybe we're a fast follower, but we need to get on board with the idea that AI is here and therefore define what these interactions look like in an equitable way for the employer and employee, right? I think right now it's employer-led, and I think we need a stronger voice from the employee.
Yeah, great point, Dom. Yeah, Charlotte, I'd love to talk about Canva and, on this topic. The head of product over at Canva, Rob, is a good friend of mine. So, and he's super excited about the opportunities that AI is presenting. And so I know as an organization, there's a lot of optimism there, but I'd love to ask you specifically about Canva's views towards AI in the hiring process and whether those views have changed and what's in focus for you.
Great, because I'm not qualified to talk about the product side of things. The way that we have kind of looked at AI throughout the hiring process, it's completely evolved how we do it. So as I mentioned previously, we do have a strong expectation that candidates have AI literacy, and that's across every role that we're hiring for. And ultimately our hiring reflects that. So we design assessments that test not just skills, but as I mentioned, that like curiosity and adaptability with AI. And we want to make sure that when people are interviewing with us, they're like candidates are looking as AI as like the creative partner, like the person that's kind of sparring with them or challenging their thinking or coming along for the ride as they go through the process. And then I think if I kind of flip it and come internally, we've made AI enablement kind of part of everyone's growth journey, which I've mentioned. And so again, those kind of foundationals required for all roles. We've got all of our like role-based playbooks. We've got coaching with AI that kind of feels natural because we want everyone to feel kind of empowered and supported as they go through not only the hiring journey, but then the moment they're in as well. We're making sure that they've got all of the kind of padding around them to help them. And I think for us, and it kind of goes back to what Dom was saying, right, is that the hardest part, I think, of any digital transformation, it's not necessarily like the technology, it's the people. And I think it's our job, particularly in the kind of people and HR space, but as leaders, is to really kind of create that clarity and courage in how you take people on that journey, no matter when they engage with you in the process. So
awesome. Claudia, I want to come to you on this one. When we were chatting, I think it was earlier this week or late last week, time flies. And you were sort of talking about how really, if you're not using AI in your work, like particularly in the field you're in, you're probably falling behind already. We'd love you to just sort of talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, of course. I think it's interesting at my company and among my peers, you can really feel the gap. So there are definitely some of us that really embrace it and have automated or, are like using it as like a partner to bounce off of, like for growth, as we were speaking about earlier. Like if I wanted to practice my skills to level up to become an AE, like you can really tell in the day-to-day the people that are using it, and you can see the gap with the people that ignore it and probably are already lagging. I think that in this day and age, choosing not to learn or adopt AI is practically like maybe choosing to become like illiterate or slowly illiterate. And it's a very bold statement to make, but I think that like training yourself to use AI and not waiting as well for your company to go and like bring it to you on a silver platter is really important, because obviously at the end of the day, the company is going to teach you the way that they want you to use it. But there's also a difference in the way that it's going to serve myself and the everyday worker the best. And I think another big thing for young people is that like we just want honesty. We don't want employers to sugarcoat it and not pretend that our roles aren't going to change. Like, we want to be told the skills that we'll need. We want to be shown how to use AI responsibly, and we want to be allowed to practice. Like, I remember first joining the company I'm at now, and for whatever reason, I felt really nervous to let people know that I was using ChatGPT, or sorry, we're meant to use Gemini at Rippling, Gemini. And so like I would kind of like hide my screen or like go into a booth and try and use it there, because like it's embarrassing if I'm not using my own brain. But that is so silly. Now I know that that's not the case at Rippling at all. Like, they really want us to use, and they're trying to empower that. And that's great, because I think otherwise us Gen Zs will probably end up teaching ourselves how to use it on TikTok at 1 a.m., which is certainly not a strategy and can't be monitored at all. Yeah.
Thanks, Claudia. I mean, three really interesting points of view here, and I love that. I love that quote. Like, if you're not using AI, you're becoming illiterate. I think we need to put that on the insights deck. It's a strong statement. We've got 2 more insights to share before we reveal the top 20, and then we'll have 10 minutes at the end for like any questions. So the second last insight is around side hustles. We kind of touched on this one a little bit earlier. It's something that's emerged in the data the last couple of years, so we wanted to dig a bit deeper onto it this year. And what we have, sorry, I'll leave that here. What we've heard is that 80% of people who are early in their career, Gen Z millennials, want a side hustle. Of them, about 40% already have a side hustle. When you dig a bit deeper and you look at what are those kind of side hustles, the majority of them, probably 2/3 of them, are like side hobbies or creative pursuits that are more about skill development than they are about trying to land your next full-time job. It's less people wanting to create portfolio careers or generate, their next full-time gig. It's more about people wanting to express themselves and have creative pursuits and develop new skills. Dom, you described yourself as the grumpy man in the room earlier, but you also talked about how growth happens outside of the main job. And so how do you think employers should make sense of this? Like, should employers be encouraging of side hustles? Should they be not encouraged? Should they be worried about the time their team's spending outside of work? Like, how do you think employers should make sense of this data?
It's a really tricky one, mate. I think this is probably the hardest question you've got on the hardest topic, because deep down, you're like, I want you to have a side hustle because there's huge benefits to that, right? You get new skills, you meet new people, diversity of thought. You're like, tick, tick, tick. And then you're like, what do you mean you're not working on my stuff? And so this hard tension of going, I want you all to myself, but I also want you to flee the nest and flourish because that makes you better. Like, I think this is a really tough one. And I think what I'd love to know is, like, if you when you click through in the detail here, is it that people feel like they have to have a side hustle? Is it that we're bridging a gap that our employees aren't giving us? Or is it actually a real desire? Is it just sort of natural evolution? I think one of the things that's fascinating here is how we do this equitably. Like, if am I paying you for time or am I paying you for ideas? And I think the great example is like law firms and accounting and audit firms. You're like, I charge in 6-minute increments. And you're like, what if I don't pay for a 6-minute increment anymore? Because knowledge is now ubiquitous and I want the smartest person. And if they got to the answer in a minute, I don't care if it took them a minute or 6 minutes. I'm going to pay you for the value that you gave me. I think there's a change in business model that a lot of organizations and industries are going through, where we charge based on value, not based on time. And that's where the side hustle, I think, becomes a major benefit. Like, if you get broader set of skills, I'm all for it. And I think it's probably something we're just going to have to embrace, even though I think maybe the older the leader or the more experienced the leader, the harder this is to adapt to. Because I started in a world where it's like, you start a job and loyalty is a thing that was sort of claimed to be valuable. Whereas now, I want variety, sod loyalty. I want to work for many different people and learn lots of different things because that sounds more fun. And that's different than the generation before me and maybe the next generation. But we're going to have to get on board with it. I don't think we've got a choice.
Charlotte, I can only imagine, because you're such a heart of gold supportive individual, that you're in favor of supporting people's side hustles, but prove me wrong.
Look, I agree with Dom. I think that they're, I don't think they are a distraction. I don't think they're disloyal. And, we see them generally as a sign of like curiosity and ambition. So we've got people doing just amazing things. And I think, there is that sometimes you see those skills flow back into that role, whether that's like through community stuff, whether that's creativity, like whatever that is. I think for us, the key thing is around clarity. So long as there's no conflict of interest, we obviously really do celebrate people growing in different directions. So I think less about like really championing those creative passions, those things that are stretching skills, just making sure that it's not in any conflict of interest.
Makes sense. I'm going to go to our final insight because we are coming towards Q&A. And the final insight is around ghosting. Just a reminder for everybody, if you've got questions, feel free to pop them in the chat for the Q&A. When we talk to candidates at Hatch, time and time again, we hear that their number one bugbear or frustration about applying to jobs is frequently being ghosted. I think if you talk to employers, you'd probably hear the same thing. Ghosting is happening in both directions. So we wanted to explore ghosting a bit further from the candidate's perspective in this year's survey. And so what we heard is that a very high % of people experience ghosting frequently when they apply to jobs, and it gives them a really negative perception of the employer brand. No surprises there. I think what's particularly interesting is we want to explore the timeline for ghosting. Like, when do you actually feel like you're being ghosted? How long does it take? And generally speaking, the majority of people, if they haven't heard back or they haven't heard anything since the last communication, after 2 weeks, then they feel like they're being ghosted, and their attitudes towards that employer brand will take a nosedive. Claudia, I want to open with a question for you here. Ghosting is certainly one way that we're hearing young people get the ick about employer brands. What else do you think are the turnoffs? Like, what are the other reasons that your peer group would be turning away from an employer brand and not wanting to consider them as a potential employer?
Yeah, I think in my mind there are three things. Those three things being vagueness is one. So I don't know, if your job ads are saying like competitive salary, but you're not even giving me a range, like it doesn't like foster any feelings of trust to like from the onset. I think, talking about growth, but you can't really talk about what the pathway is or give me any examples of candidates that I can reach out to on LinkedIn that have gone from SDR to AE to manager, whatever it might be. Because I think that we're growing up with insane amounts of transparency online. And if you can't be upfront with me, like, it feels a bit shady. And that kind of leads me into the next point, which is a bit of like a culture theater. I don't like, while of course, bean bags and kombucha on tap or like Friday pizzas are awesome. Like, in saying that, if your Glassdoor reviews are screaming like burnout, low salary, not worth it, management's horrible, like that just doesn't align. And obviously there's something going on here. Like, it doesn't feel right. We do receipt checking per se, like as a sport, as Gen Zs. And so if the story doesn't really match the reality, we'll find it out pretty quick. And I think that digital footprint is like the last one. I think that if your leaders, if you're, even the lowest level of employees, like an SDR, aren't posting online, aren't engaging with each other, with the other companies in the field, and like, it feels like the company doesn't really have any voice online. It almost feels like you don't exist to us, which is a harsh thing to say. But, by contrast, companies like Canva and Hatch and Notion, as another example, like I'm seeing everywhere at the moment. And of course, those companies are definitely putting time and effort and investing into those employer brands, but they do show up and they are front of mind. And that visibility definitely builds trust that I think a lot of Gen Zs see and acknowledge and appreciate.
Love that answer. Thanks, Claudia. Charlotte, on the other side of the fence, what do you feel employers can do to help reduce the ghost rate? I know it's a big problem. It can be hard to get on top of application volume. What have you seen work in reality?
Yeah, I'm still thinking about the term corporate ick. So I think with the way that we approach it, and this is something that just has been so kind of deeply embedded into our teams, is that candidates are potential customers too. And so it's really ensuring that the people that you are interacting with, you're treating with respect, because we've set really, really clear kind of service levels and expectations for ourselves. So whether that's like how fast we respond, the tone that we use, like when you call someone versus when you email them. And I guess my advice would be know when you're willing to automate some of those things. So what are your trade-offs? What are you willing to kind of automate? What are you willing to give up the kind of human touch for? But I guess like the trick for us really is more mindset based and instilling that in the team throughout. And it's about having respect. So respect for the time, respect for the energy, also the hope that someone's put into applying, and acknowledging that we don't always get it perfect, but we are ultimately committed to, as a team, making sure that no one does feel left in the dark. And I think that's how we build trust in Canva, not just as an employer, but also as a product. And you know that flows both ways.
Brilliant.
Adam, just want to, I feel like job applications and job adverts go away. They go away in the next few years. And this becomes a two-sided marketplace. And you've got companies that need skills and mindset and attitude, and you've got a community of people, and they're matched. And that happens in a way more organic fashion than this sort of like, I'm applying to work for you and you will vet me. That process, I think, just disappears pretty soon. And the two-sided marketplace becomes the new reality.
We're really on the same page of that one, Dom, I've got to tell you. Love that point of view. I was going to ask you for a radical take at the end, and you gave it to me anyway, so I really appreciate it. So I want to jump into some Q&A. Before we do, I'm going to reveal who actually was on top of the hot list. So who were the employer brands that most young Australians want to work for in 2025? You can see the top 20 here. Couple of things to call out about the top 20. First of all, Canva's in there. Canva's actually one of the top 3. So big congrats to Charlotte, and certainly a lot of the work that Charlotte's talked about today is paying dividends in the candidate community with the employer brand. Atlassian's also in there, and Dom's been a big part of the employer brand at Atlassian. So big congrats on that one. Yeah, a couple of other insights. 12 of the top 20 are Australian homegrown brands. That's interesting that, you know, more young Australians are looking to work at local employers. Again, maybe talks to that sense of security. Another insight is that there's a fairly heavy tech representation in here. There's quite a few different industries represented, but there's a lot of tech. And I think, once again, that talks to the security story in terms of people looking to forge careers in employers that are on the front foot of the AI revolution. Lastly, I would say there's a great variety of employers in here, different sizes, different industries, different types of employers. And I think that's a good reminder that anybody can build a strong employer brand. Anybody can build a strong employer value proposition, you know, when you pay attention to the needs of your audiences and, you know, and you respond to them appropriately. It's open for all. So in the time we have left, would love to do a little bit of Q&A. I'm just going to leave that slide there. Bella's been having a look at a couple of the questions next to me, so I'm going to read out the first that she pulled out. This one's for Charlotte. And the question is, how should we be measuring the success of talent attraction initiatives?
Oh, great question. And I think something to be completely transparent that we constantly struggle with, because there are so many ways that talent engages with your brand. So we can kind of go through like a traditional market funnel and your marketing funnel, and you can say, this person saw my ad on LinkedIn, they went through the process and they applied for a job, therefore that's a win. But the realities that's actually not the case. So the way that we do it at Canva, we actually don't have an aggressive kind of, we spent X and we hired 12 people as a result of that, unless we're doing a very specific campaign. When we're thinking about it more broadly, the way that we operate is and I think this kind of speaks really clearly to Claudia's point as well, we look at things like our brand health. So we partner with our marketing team to look at things like brand health. We keep an eye on channels like our Glassdoor, Blind, etc. Like, what are our communities saying about us? And we take probably more of a qualitative approach to our talent attraction and how we kind of measure that back, because it's so fickle. I think talent attraction is such a fickle kind of process, and we also know that we could spend so much money on, I don't know, hiring, and then the hiring we work in a paced, changing industry, the hiring needs change. And that's not necessarily a reflection of the work, that's a reflection of the process. So what we've done is we've had to just take probably a more holistic view to our talent attraction. And we've got a little bit of quant, but we've really doubled down on the qual in order for us to share that back to stakeholders.
So interesting. Is the qual through just conversations you're having with candidates, or is it more structured than that?
Yep. So we do a combination of things. So things like looking at what our interview reports say on Glassdoor. I don't know if anyone's been through the Canva hiring process, but we do check in and we ask, how's the process going? Well, like, how are you feeling? Do you have the information that you need? So we do that. And then every now and again, we also reach out to silver medalist candidates, and we just ask really clearly, like, how was the process? How did you engage with us? How did you come through the funnel? What made you think, yeah, I'm going to go for that role? What was it about the job ad? That type of stuff, and really just trying to get a little bit more insight rather than necessarily going off LinkedIn's. We put this video up and you hired 3 people as a result of it, because that probably it's not telling much of a story.
Brilliant. Thank you, Charlotte. We've got probably time for one last question. Dom, this one's for you. And the question is, have you seen any companies that do employee engagement really well that we can learn from?
Yeah, there's a few out there. It depends what you mean by well. My definition of doing it well is doing it honestly. I think to Claudia's point before, it's like if you're advertising one thing and then I get in and have a very different experience, that's not well for me, right? You might have a very polished process, but it's BS, right? So the more authentic, the more credible, the more likely it is that at the 30, 60, 90-day mark, I go, oh, this is kind of like it was advertised. Whether that be you're in the office 5 days, or here's the perks, or here's the culture. Like, if those things that you advertise become true, I think that's a good employee value prop, and therefore a good experience, because you're not putting me through this weird dissonance of going, but you advertise greatness and beanbags and you treat me like crap and make me work late. So I think there's a moment of like honesty. Like, it seems like a really weird word to use in 2025, but I think if you're just honest about what you offer and what you don't, people are going to self-select in or self-select out. Then there's less of a surprise. And I think instead of fluff and polish and words and best practice and all the BS, theater, I think, Claudia, the word you used before, instead of all that theater, just be like, hey, here's how we operate. If you want to work that way, awesome, in. If not, there's plenty of other jobs out there. Like, we're good. And then that's when this matching, kind of to your point before, Adam, that matching of a two-sided marketplace becomes more real, because it's not me applying for a job. It's me ending up in an environment where I can thrive, where they want me, right? It's a two-sided deal. So I think any employee value prop that's honest is a good one.
Yeah, I think that really talks to, Claudia, your point earlier of like the transparency and how important that is to you. And, if an employer is saying that they're transparent, but they don't follow through, it just, like turns you off. And I do think, Dom, that matching point, resonates. It's exactly what we're building over here at Hatch. And so I'm really excited about that future. It's right on 12, so I think we'll wrap there. I want to say really big thanks to our 3 panelists, Dom, Claudia, and Charlotte. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all of your wisdom and experience with us. And we'll, for everyone who joined, thank you for joining. We'll share around a link to download the full report. What we ran through today was just a couple of highlights, but there's a lot more depth there in terms of data and insights you can dig into. So we'll share that round. Big thanks again, and hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon.
Adam, thanks from all of us for the team at Hatch for doing this kind of research and sharing it. It's really good. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom. And, I should actually say a really big thanks to the team who's worked on it. Tamsin, Hannah, Bella, who's next to me. It's been an amazing effort. And we love to see the insights that come out of it each year. So big props to the team.